My name is Ken Shopman. I'm a member of the board here at 40 Plus, also a graduate of our course in 2015. And I'm an association executive in a transition myself, so thank you all for coming. We're very happy you're here. And I know most of you are familiar with 40 Plus, but we have a couple of folks who are new, or maybe that might be their first time. Just want to give you a quick overview of our special organization. And what makes 40 Plus special is that we are an all-volunteer group. And we've thrived for close to 65 years. Established in 1953 here in Washington. The group was actually originally established in the 30s in New York City by some of the leaders of industry. Titans like Tom Watson, J.C. Penney, Norman Vincent Peale, Arthur Godfrey, all who recognized that in the height of the Depression, workers who were 40 and over were going to face special challenges. Back then, it was more about the physical limitations. Did you have the strength, the endurance to do a lot of physical labor? And so they set up this 40 Plus meeting club in New York City to help people understand and exchange ideas about how to overcome those challenges. The Washington, D.C. group was established in 1953, and we're very proud of the fact that we are the longest standing and about the only continuing 40 Plus organization in the U.S. And I think that some of the dynamics of the Washington environment have contributed to why this organization has remained necessary and important over those 65 years. I think we have three pillars that we offer. Content, like tonight, connections that all of you are going to make with each other, and together, a community. Because I often say that 40 Plus is a judgment-free zone. When we're in a transition and we're sort of outside of the workforce, it can be very challenging. Their isolation can be a real issue, which is why one of our hallmark programs is our Monday morning speaker series, intentionally designed and scheduled 10 o'clock Monday morning right here, every Monday, just about, because we want you to start the week on a high note. Get away from the computer, get out of the house, maybe dress up a little bit, engage with other people, and learn something. And so that's a heartbeat of 40 Plus. Every Monday morning, you'll have an opportunity to engage and learn something. Of course, tonight is an example of an evening event that we host once a month, right here, where we focus on a topic that's going to be attractive to not only those of us who are in a transition, but those who are working and may just be looking over the fence or looking at what other options might be. So we're very happy that Denise is here with us this evening. And then, for those who are serious about their search, we offer a comprehensive career transition skills training program. In very small groups, no more than 7 students at a time, we walk you through a comprehensive program around career transition. Whether you need help with your resume, your interviewing skills, social media, or just the overall strategy. Tonight, in fact, is the capstone of our most recent class, and several of our participants have been here going through a post-class assessment where we try to evaluate and help you evaluate how you do on mock interview environments and some networking environments after the class, and contrast that with where you were 4 short weeks ago before the class. We hope you see some improvement. So those are the 3 core programs of 40 Plus. As I mentioned, for 65 years, we've helped thousands and thousands of professionals here in the DC area. So if you or anyone you know might be interested and could benefit from that, please take a moment. I'd be happy to tell you more about it. And we have our last class of the year. So if you or someone you know wants that job by the end of the year, now's the time. So November 9, we're going to be starting our final class for 2017. And so it's a great time to be involved in 40 Plus. So enough of that. Denise, thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to give a quick introduction to Denise and turn it over to her because she's the reason I'm here this evening. Denise Riebman is a career happiness coach. I love that expression. Director of career development, a trainer, and a consultant. She inspires career happiness through coaching and presenting. It's what she loves to do. Through a strength-based positive psychology focused on career coaching, she provides individuals with highly specialized, pragmatic tools that apply to immediate changes as well as long-term career happiness. She has cross-sector leadership, leveraging strategic partnerships, launching high-impact programs, and building sustainable operations and administrative systems from the ground up. She has career development expertise in individual advising and programming resulting in highly satisfied students and clients and high employment rates for the public, nonprofit, and private sectors. She has diverse experience in national service with AmeriCorps, the AmeriCorps Alum Career Coaching, the National Advisory Council, and the AmeriCorps VISTA program as well. She's also an adjunct professor at George Washington University, a career coach and trainer, and the director of the Career Development and Alumni Services at George Washington's Trachtenberg School of Public Policy and Public Administration. So with that, I'll turn it over to Denise, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. So I want everybody to stand up if you've ever had a job. If you've ever had at least one job, stand up for me. Everybody, some people might not. Okay. Stay standing if you've had 5 jobs. If you've had 5 or less, sit down. Okay, 5 or less, sit down. If you've had 10 or less, sit down. If you've had 15 or less, sit down. 20 or less, sit down. Do you notice I'm still standing? I've had about 25 jobs in my time. I know. The look of like, oh my God. I mean, I count them all the way down to my first job, actually sorting metal at my father's scrap yard, because probably my first job. My first job was really at an ice cream shop when I was 13. I've had a lot of jobs. I actually think that's one of my best qualifications for this, is I've had a lot of jobs. I had my own crazy career transition. I ended up falling into career services because a grant I was working on ran out of money. I had one of the best job titles I'd ever had. Project Manager, War on Poverty. Pretty good job title, right? Until the job ran out of money. And they said, this is job and career services. Kind of, you're a trainer, you're trained as a coach, would you want to do this? Who would have known that was what I was meant to do? And I've been doing this now for about 11 years. So that's, I think, one of my best qualifications, is not the 11 years, is the fact that I've been through a lot of career transitions myself. So today, is there a chance, can people see this okay the way the lights are, or is it possible to?
Let's experiment.
Yeah.
So, some lights are going to go out, but I'm not sure which
Let's
ones.
see.
That doesn't help.
Yeah.
That's a little better.
Is that a little better? Yeah, that looks nice. It's kind of like evening lighting.
That's right.
You hurt your ankle?
You good?
Yeah, just hopefully did not destroy the things in this.
Right.
Okay, I think we're okay. So this is a very famous quote that people see, right? What would you attempt to do if you could not fail? I actually don't like that quote. This is my preferred use of this quote. Because the reality is, we are going to fail, right? Whether it's in a job, to get a job, we're not going to get the job. To me, the gift about finding what they're meant to do is to be okay with knowing you are going to fail. You know, when I was 40, I moved to this town. I knew nobody. My boyfriend and I thought I was going to marry, broke up 5 weeks after I moved here, and I was in a job that was a horrible fit for me. Talk about how you could define that as failure, you know? But it ended up being the biggest gift of my life. So when we frame everything today, when you think about all this, it's how can you look at failing as a gift? You know, one of my favorite positive psychology teachers always says, he's like, until you learn to fail, you will fail to learn. Until you learn to fail, you will fail to learn. So I think that's one thing that's really important for us to think about today. The next thing I want to talk about is a term we hear a lot about, this idea of grit. It's really big in the news. Thomas Edison. Light bulb took 1,000 steps. There was a really, really interesting study that was done in the UK that they looked at. This study blows my mind. I love research, by the way, so be prepared. There might be some research coming out tonight. But this kind of stuff really backs things up. 30,000 randomly sampled CVs and resumes to look at what made the statistical difference in predicting who actually got a job. Okay? So it was like none of the usual advice that people got. It didn't matter, you know, all the things that they would typically think. What mattered was grit. When people had one grit statement on their resume, an ability to overcome 1,000 times of finding that flashlight, tripled their chance of not just landing the interview, but actually getting the job. 2 times it was septupled it, the chance of getting a job. 2 examples of grit on your resume. So what that is on your resume, showing somebody that like you pursued a difficult goal, you dug in, and you figured out a way. My students know I push very, very hard on resumes. I've studied resumes for many years, and I push people hard because the reality is, just as a FYI, most of you might already know this, is nobody's reading your cover letter until your resume gets into the yes pile. And even when it's in the yes pile, they might not even look at the cover letter. If there's 20, 25 resumes in that yes pile, and they know 10 of those people, they're the ones that are getting passed on to the hiring manager who may or may not read your cover letter. So that resume better have these examples of grit, that better grab their attention. So just think about the way that you rewrite your resume by showing grit. Again, it's not just going to get you the interview, but it helps you land the job because this is how you're going to present yourself in the interview. It's telling a story. I'm a really big fan of people telling stories, and you might already all been trained in this in an interview. You know, if you can in like 30 seconds to 120 seconds tell a story, the person interviewing you gets actually a dopamine fix. They like you more. Then they ask you another question. It goes like this. So knowing grit stories on your resume, your cover letter, your interview, to me it's career brain hacks. That's what we're trying to do. So it's understanding what this means to how to have grit and to look at what you've done in your life. And the grit examples, whether it's how you view yourself in your resume, they don't have to be that you invented the light bulb. We're not all going to be inventing the light bulb. It could be that you streamlined one simple process at the organization. It could be that you turned a donor who had never given to the organization to all of a sudden becoming an active member. The great examples don't have to be huge, but they have to be yours. This is your story to tell. I'm all about authenticity. So this also is huge. Anybody ever feel like this? Poor little horse could really get away, right? There's research that shows, it's called the self-perception theory. We get stuck in the way of thinking about ourselves. I work with I've worked with thousands of people in career coaching. And people get really stuck with like, this is my story of how I'm perceiving myself. And really all it is, it's this like lovely little plastic chair. How your brain likes to work is your brain's attitude will change if your behaviors change. So if you start acting, it's that whole thing, acting as if, your brain will start to shift in that way. Research actually shows this. And they don't have to be grand changes. There's small little action steps people can take that can change the way that they're showing up in their job search. Brains have a funny way of working. Actually, research shows when people accept their jobs, they actually rate them more positively than they did before because now they've accepted it. It's theirs to own, so all of a sudden they start to rate it more positively. So it's funny things the way our brain does. A couple other funny things I want to talk to you about. This is my favorite cereal in the whole wide world. How many people in the room consider themselves lucky? How many people consider themselves unlucky? Somewhere in the middle? So there's research by this guy named Robert Wiseman, who's done a lot of research around why people are lucky and unlucky. And I train a lot with people around career on this. I trained some business school students over at Hopkins recently, and an entire thing around the impact of luck. Why are some people lucky and unlucky? It's nothing you're born with, but this is how you create opportunities. And this is huge to me in how people build their careers. One, lucky people tend to strike up conversations more. They did a study where they told two different groups of people who had self-selected before, who was lucky and unlucky, they were going to go meet them in a diner, okay? And the study was all set up. They had put money on the ground right outside the diner. They had one seat available in the diner. To the one side of the person was actually somebody who might have had an opportunity for them. People who self-selected as unlucky missed the money, sat at the diner, didn't start the conversation. People who were self-described as lucky noticed the money, they were more aware, and actually struck up a conversation with somebody. So they created that. Lucky decisions, they trust their gut more. People who are lucky, they really listen intuitively to their body. I do a lot of work with mindfulness and meditation, which I believe is a huge role in people having that pause that they notice. We're so busy going. I like to remind my clients all the time, we're human beings, not human doings. And when we're being a little bit more versus doing, we have that pause in our life that allows us to listen to these lucky decisions. Self-fulfilling prophecies. Again, another study this guy Robert Wiseman did, which was fascinating. He gave people newspapers. Again, self-selected, lucky and unlucky. Count the number of pictures in the newspapers. People who considered themselves lucky were done in like seconds, and there were 43 pictures. People who were unlucky, took several minutes, but they still found it. They don't count pictures faster, right? Lucky people don't count pictures faster, do they? What it was there was a half-page ad that said, stop counting, tell the instructor there's 43 pictures. But people who were unlucky are so focused on this. You know, I'm unlucky, I'm never gonna be able to find this, it's gonna take me a long time. They missed this. They missed that ad. They also missed, there was another ad later on the paper that said, stop counting, tell the instructor, get $250. They missed both of these because they were so focused on the problem at hand. Again, becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then finally, they have this resilient attitude, which is we talked about with grit. These are the 4 characters. He has a wonderful book called The Luck Factor. You can also just read some of his books on information online that have to do with this. And it has to do with another really big theory that I'm a huge fan of, this idea of hope. Hope is a higher indicator of success. It can factor in academic success, career success. They studied students going to law school. They rated them on a hope scale. They also looked at their LSAT scores and their GPAs going to law school. Which do you think was a higher indicator of how well they were going to do? Hope. Because what hope is doing is they approach life in a goal-oriented way. They find a different way. It doesn't mean that things are perfect, but when they come up with an obstacle, they're like, okay, this is an obstacle. Let me come up with a different way to do this. And then they believe that they can do it. So it's the belief at the same time. One of my favorite books is called Make Hope Happen. Shane Lopez, there's incredible working on this. But when I work with clients, if I have clients who don't believe in hope, they're not feeling hopeful in their belief, we take a pause and really explore that first. So one other big we're going to go big picture first, and then we're going to go into some practical things. You guys are going to get going and be a little busier. One of my other favorite things in the world. I already had a couple pieces back there. Chocolate. What does chocolate have to do with careers? Take a guess. Somebody take a guess. Why do I have a picture of chocolate here?
Rewards.
Rewards. What does rewards do?
It's back to your dopamine and all the rest of that.
Yeah. It's actually called positivity priming, and the official term is positivity priming. But there was, this is again, I told you I was going to give you a lot of studies. There was a really cool study that was done. 3 groups of doctors. One group, they were given a patient diagnosis to solve. One group was given nothing. One group was given medical information to read, and one group was given a piece of candy. They weren't even allowed to eat the candy before because they didn't want it to affect their bloodstream. Trust me, as someone who lives on sugar, I can understand it affects bloodstream. That group of doctors solved the patient diagnosis faster, more creatively, and less likely to do what's called anchoring. Anchoring is seeing things the same way we've been seeing it. So how would that help if you were about to eat a piece of chocolate, if chocolate was your thing, before you sat down and started to look at jobs or go to a networking event? What would that help you do? It would help you actually things light up. So I want to take a pause here and ask you all, everybody has different positivity priming. What would be some things that you could do? Just shout out some things. I've had some clients go for a run before they go into something. I've had somebody who, before she went into an interview, she literally, because we talked about this, she had her niece do a really funny dance that makes her laugh, and she put it on her video of her phone, and she played it right before going into the video. What are some things that you personally feel like you could do that would be like positivity priming for you, whether it's sitting down in front of your computer to write a cover letter, going into an interview? What are some things?
I read a favorite verse of scripture.
Great. What else?
Have an arrangement that you're going to tell a friend about it afterwards.
Great. Have a support system, people. What else brings you joy? They don't have to be substantive.
Essential oils.
Essential oils, yeah.
Music, I listen to music.
Music is great.
Visit in my garden.
Great. What else? Come on. I want people to share ideas, because this is really helpful for people to hear what else they can do. Watch Scandal. So you might set up a reward for yourself is that you watch for the first 15-minute break, and then you do some job stuff, and then you do another break. It actually changes things in your brain. When people are primed for positivity, you actually have more peripheral vision. Isn't that crazy? So this stuff is about feeling good, but it's not just about feeling good. It's about when you look at a job, if you're in that mental state, you're going to have a different framework than if you have not positively primed yourself. So right now, does everyone have paper? I want everybody on a note card here to write. I want everybody to write at least 3 things that they themselves can leave from here and think about. This is the way you could positively prime yourself the next time you have a job, you have a career, you're in a stressful situation in your job. So everybody, I want everybody, I'm all about pragmatic things. So I want everybody to take a minute to do this. Before we move into some substances. Does everybody have something?
So we're writing again something that.
You don't have to share it with anybody. This is going to be just for you, because I always feel like, I don't know about you guys, but I go to a lot of trainings, and you leave a training, you're like, okay, what was that? Did I actually do that? Oh, I'm not going to remember to do that. I want you to think about like at least 3 things that you can do the next time you're about to go into a stressful meeting if you're in a job. You're about to go into an interview. You're about to sit down into your computer and write a cover letter. You're going into a networking event. What are things that for you do positivity priming? Does everybody get a card? Who wants a card? A shorter card? I want you to walk out with something substantive here. And this card is going to be for you. We're going to be writing a few more things on it through the session here. So again, you don't need to share. Nobody needs to know. It could be illicit if you want it to be illicit. But just think about what lights you up. I hope everybody's got lots of things in their mind. Raise your hand if you need another couple seconds. Okay, so let's go into career happiness. This is the framework, and this is not, an unusual framework. A lot of people have things, models, you've probably seen this around careers. This is the way I talk to people around career happiness. And there's a handout in your guide. You'll have this handout. And we're going to dig into all of these today. And the final one, just to make sure that you're aware, that you really notice, is I want people to always dream big around career happiness, but I want them to be really mindful about the market. I want you to be pragmatic, to think about. I worked with a client of mine who, she realized through our work together, she really wanted to go into fashion. DC doesn't have a huge fashion field, right? She really wasn't tied to this area. She relocated to New York City. So you want to be realistic about, sometimes when someone wants to make a career shift, what is in the market where you live if this is where you are going to be staying? So really kind of always, I like to get a dream, but pragmatic. So we're going to spend some time going through each of these and doing some activities. So the first one to me is strengths, which is a combination of the things that are in you that light you up always. These are kind of the gifts that you probably always had, and the extrinsic competencies. These are your external learned acquired competencies. I'm certified in Gallup. They have a strength finders, and this is how they define strength, is when you have these talents combined with investment. Because you could be good at something, but if you're not taking any time to do it, it's not really going to be a big strength of yours. So how do you start to figure this out, and why does it matter? These statistics are staggering. I mean, that's just, I'm going to knock this whole thing over, or I'm going to hold on a second. To me, this is just, there we go. Are these numbers surprising to anybody? They're surprising. Why are they surprising? Say more.
Primarily just because it's I think it's just the size of the number.
Yeah, 18 times more likely to flourish at work. Gallup has been studying strengths for many, many years. Anybody know the percentage of people that are actually fully engaged at work? What the percentage is of the American population?
30%.
30%. Cost the American economy about $350 billion annually because people aren't flourishing at their jobs. It's a huge number to know what your strengths are. And it doesn't necessarily mean, that your job needs to be everything at all reasons for you, but it's looking at the ways to bring your strengths into the work and the impact that it has in your life. Yeah.
But strengths alone won't do it. It has to be out the environment in which you're using the strengths to get
Right, well that's why I talk about the intersection of the 3, but the strengths are a huge factor. So when I talk about strengths, values, and purpose, the 3 of those are a really big intersection together. But it's interesting. It's a slight diversion from this. It's a study. There's a woman named Amy Radinsky who does work around what's called career orientation and job prompting. She's from the Yale School of Management, and she has studied people on their career orientation. And I'm just going to use this as an example to talk about how people find meaning in their work and their purpose. And we'll talk about this a little later, but it kind of relates to this, is that she studied, for example, hospitals. And she saw doctors in their hospitals that view what they do as a job, and janitors viewing what they do as a calling. Because the doctors, this maybe wasn't their strength, but they kind of fell into this line of work. And then by the time to talk about sunken costs, how much money you spend in being a doctor, and it was really hard, and they're making a lot of money, so it was really hard to leave that. You might find a janitor who really loves doing that, who also found a way to find meaning. And this is actually when her studies are fascinating, that she would hear stories about janitors who in the coma ward would move pictures around because they had heard that some different stimulus in a coma ward would actually help somebody. They would go above and beyond in their job. So they really felt like it was playing to their strengths of who they are. So it's not necessarily that the strengths have to be what's esteemed in society, it's what your strengths are. I recently said to somebody, I actually don't really love being a director of a university. I love my job, I love my university. My love and my strengths come from coaching students in workshops. I don't like all the faculty meetings and all that kind of stuff. That's not my strength. I know other people that do. So it's not necessarily tied to aspirations, it's tied to more of your strengths with that. So how do you figure some of this out? In your guide, I have some things, like these are some assessments that I have. Strength Finders is one that I'm certified in. I also use VIA assessment a lot. That's from University of Pennsylvania. I'm in the School of Positive Psychology. That one's free, so I use, these are the two that I tend to use the most. I pulled together what I feel like are the ones that are the most commonly used. There's a lot of different strengths that these different assessments people use. So you might use some other ones, and then some other extrinsic competencies. These are kind of skill sets. We're going to dig in and do some activities here ourselves in this. So these are, but I wanted people to have these tools, and these are all in your in the second page of it's in your handout. So here are some ways, without having to pay for something else, that I talk to people about. Look at your performance reviews. I had a student in my office this morning, and he was working on a cover letter, and he was using words like, I'm flexible, I'm adaptable, I'm a good team player. You're laughing, right? It's like, oh my God, could these words be any more cliche? You hear this from HR all the time. Don't put the adjectives on a resume. Tell me what you've done. So I said to him, tell me what your colleagues, how they would describe you. What's been in your performance evaluation? We talked about all that, and all of a sudden the stories he was telling was so dynamic and engaging, and I was, as he was talking, I was pulling words and working sentences into his cover letter, because he wasn't worrying about cover letter speak, but instead he was speaking about who he really was. An example I like to give from this, actually this is from the crowdsourcing one. I always tell people if they do this, they can blame me. I'm not a big fan of Facebook, but Facebook is a good place to do this. To put on Facebook to your friends and say, my career coach, my career director, ask me what 3 words or phrases would you say are my greatest strengths? You're going to get words. No one's probably going to put you're a team player on there, right? So I had one of my students, she wanted to go into consulting, and she was, what word do you think she was using for consulting? Problem solver. How many times do you hear that word, right? So she had done this on her crowdsourcing, and she had several friends who knew her from she was a kid who were like, oh my God, you always loved doing puzzles. You were always either doing jigsaw puzzles, crossword puzzles. We incorporated that into her cover letter, that since she was a kid, she's innately drawn to like putting things together and has always done crossword puzzles and jigsaw puzzles. It told a story about who she was that felt authentic, not like she was just putting language on the cover letter because that's what they wanted to hear. It was still what they wanted to hear, but it was said in her voice. So crowdsourcing is a fun one. Reflective best self, this is a Harvard Business Review article having to do, again, this is grounded in a lot of positive psychology. This is one that I just think helps people to really think about, and we're going to work about the flow one in a minute. But what are you naturally drawn to? No big surprise, when I was a kid, I competed in public speaking contests. I love that. What do you crave learning more about? You're going to know these answers. What do you lose track of time in doing? And what do you know? It just comes easily to you. Other people, you're like, why don't you just get this? My God, I had a grad assistant work for me last year. She would get so excited, and it just came so naturally easy to do statistics on Excel spreadsheets. Her face would light up as if, like I had given her like the lottery number. I was like, wow, but it just came easily to her. And then the bucket activities. So we're going to do a couple activities related to this. And the first one is related to flow. Anyone want to take a chance on his last name? Csikszentmihalyi. One of the founders of positive psychology is just phenomenal. He's written a lot around flow. And recognizing this sweet spot is huge. It's when the challenge level of your job meets your skill level. It speaks to kind of what you were talking about there. If I was in a job where, say, my skills, like it was too easy, I would be bored, even if I was using my skills. Or if it was like something high anxiety, right? Like it's way, way beyond my skill set. So it's knowing what these times of flow are, which typically are times when they talk about flow, it's not an extended period. It's not like, oh, I did this for a week. It's like, oh, I worked on this one project at my job. Or when I was in this class in college, this happened to me. It's thinking about those singular moments in time that really have lit you up. An activity, and in a minute what I'm going to have you do, so keep thinking about this as I'm talking, is you're going to think about a time that you've had felt flow, and then you're going to share it with somebody and share that story, and then they're going to relate back what they have heard about what strengths you're using in that situation. It doesn't have to be a professional situation. It can be in an academic. My preference when I work with people is to draw on professional situations because I think you get more of the answers, but sometimes you can't always find them professional. Story I like to show about this that I think is really helpful, because when I work with my clients, I ask them to come up with 10 times. And I had a client, very accomplished in her early 40s, nonprofit world, gave me the list. We started to look through it, and she started to cry. And I said, what's going on? She said, this is a fraud. She said, I actually did not feel flow any of these times when we started to talk about it. Then we started to talk. She said, the only time I ever remember feeling flow was, I can't remember how long ago it was. She said there was a job at the School of Social Work near where I go to college, near where she lives. And she said, I really wanted to work in their office. And she said, even though they were looking for somebody who had an MSW, that cover letter just came right out of me. She goes, and I even hand-delivered the cover letter. Then we used that as a starting off point. She started to share with me, she'd originally wanted to get an MSW, had met her husband in college, or shortly after college, didn't pursue the MSW. Almost all of her friends were MSWs. She realized this was a huge thing that she was going to regret. Well, she has been writing to me. She has been going, while she's knitting, she has 2 kids and a husband and a mortgage. She lowered her job hours just a little bit and is going back to school part-time to get her MSW. And it came out of recognizing that she actually couldn't, in 20 years of working, even identify anything of flow that was in her jobs. And it came from realizing it was outside of her job. And there was just something that was so drawn to this work. It was one of those times with career coaching. It brought me to tears. I was so excited to see somebody taking the courage for this. And she was in her 40s making the shift. I have clients all the time in their 40s. This is often a time where I see people really doing this. So what I want you to do is I'm going to ask you, and each person's going to have a couple minutes to both share your story, and I'll let you know when it's been about 2 minutes to shift. To share a story of a time when you felt flow. Again, think about it. It's going to be a time-limited moment. It might be you delivered a speech. It might be you were working on a presentation. It might be that you were doing statistical analysis. You got a new business contract. You were working with a patient where you just really lost track of time and sense, and you really felt like your skills were completely matched in that moment. Does it make sense? Any questions about what flow is? So what I want you to do in a minute is you're going to find a partner. You're going to share your story. Your partner is just going to initially just listen, no comments, just literally active listening. Then when you're done your story, what I want your partner to do is say, when you were describing that story, I heard these strengths. You're not going to finish the story and say, oh, I know what you're talking about. This is not about that. It's what's called strength spotting. You're going to say to the person, it sounds like you have really high levels of empathy. It sounds like you're incredibly organized. So you're going to be going back. It almost goes back to, go back in here, as strength spotting, you're going to be telling them what intrinsic talents of theirs you saw and what extrinsic competencies you were seeing demonstrated in that situation. And then you'll switch. Okay? Question?
What if you literally cannot think of anything that would apply to that? Because I've been thinking about it for the last couple of days and I cannot come up with anything.
You know what I would think about? Is there anything in your personal life? Like I remember I did this once with a student and she was struggling too, and she talked about a time when she was her junior year abroad and all of her friends left and she was walking around Prague by herself. And we ended up actually, it was really interesting from that example, we realized that some of the companies she was applying for wasn't a great fit for her because she really, when she started to talk about what brought her flow in those moments and joy in those moments when she was traveling by herself, was that she was independent, she was lit up by lots of new information. So it could be a favorite television, something you're cooking at home. Is there a certain time when you're cooking something? When someone mentioned their garden, when you're in your garden. Reading a book. Is there certain books that light you up? So anything that just kind of lights you up that when you're doing it. If you can't think of anything, then use your time. I would say to just share with somebody what strengths you have, and maybe you guys can brainstorm some things that might bring you flow together for your time. So if not, just kind of talk about some of those things, okay? So sometimes it's hard to be doing this on the spot like this. So what I would say to people, there's no right or wrong answer to this. You might think of something that's even flow-ish. If you can't think of something that's in that magical, I've lost all sense of time, think about just something you enjoy, that brings you joy, and just share that instead. This is an example of something I really encourage people when I do these workshops to do on your own afterwards. So it might be hard in the moment to think of it, but at least it's getting your juices flowing. You might go home after this and start thinking of things after this, but it's just a chance to do this. It's also a chance to hear somebody reflect back to you what kind of strengths you're starting to hear in these examples. Any other questions? So what I would love you to do is to find a partner. Everybody find a partner. I'm going to go back to that slide. And second, we'll say Joe. And then I'll tell you when to shift.
No, actually, it was in me. Before we even started, I thought of an example.
So, anybody need one more time for a switch? Okay, I'll give you guys another 30 seconds.
So he asked me, but it involved putting together a weekly newspaper, deadlines, and putting together all the stories and reporting, photography, and it's really intense work for and I did this
But if you
I
put
realized
people as a challenge,
all of the things I'd like to do, and actually, my grandmother the scoring.
So if you haven't shared, it's now your chance to share. You're gonna get another, we're gonna give it 3 minutes. So if you were the person who was sharing, now you're the one who's actually listening, the other
So,
person's now.
and what I said about him, did that apply?
No, you
Absolutely,
should
yeah.
give the strengths part in that first session. So
Almost
if
today,
you
you know, I
didn't,
had
you'll have this time now. So you
I
haven't
kind of almost fallen into it.
So in the next 3 minutes, the person who's sharing the story, you want to share your story in about a minute or so, and then have the other person to be sharing the strength. So keep your stories kind of succinct with it.
Yeah,
Give
deadline,
compelling information.
teamwork,
If you did not get 2
detail.
extra minutes here,
Also,
so
you have
you
another
can get a chance to
component
debrief
that
on the
you're
person's
constantly
strengths, so
learning
give her the
stuff.
strengths,
I
okay?
imagine
Yeah,
about the new things.
something that's now true to this day. I'm a real consumer of news. I love reading. I have to start walking into newspapers. You know, I don't feel like I'm doing day after day. I feel like I'm I hate Sundays. It's like a lost day, foggy day. having the hard yeah, same experience. It's still enjoyable.
Yeah.
It makes time fly, but yeah, looking for something.
No, I say this every time as a trainer, I need to give a gentle bell. So what came up for people? Clearly there was a lot of energy going on. First of all, before you talk about what came up, how did it feel in your body and in your voice to be talking about something that felt that fulfilling and that flow? How did it feel?
Good.
Spoken from the woman who is struggling. Did you come up with something? Did you come up with something that was flowish even?
I guess.
But even just, I mean, how often, it's really interesting is so, just to kind of take a pause, I keep telling you guys to put in a research, but human beings actually have what's called a negativity bias. Have you all heard of negativity bias? So we like to talk about what's negative. It protects us, it's part of our biological wiring. We don't often get enough of a chance to talk about what's good, let alone to kind of share it with somebody else. So it does, it feels good. Where does it feel good? Do you notice some differences in the way you talk and the way you sit?
You forget if you're tired.
That's our energy.
Right. It brings in energy.
You start to feel passion again, like you.
It's beautiful. You remember what brings you passion and excitement. It's so easy to forget it in life. Particularly at this population, at this point in our lives, a lot of us are balancing more than we did when we were younger. And it's so easy. A lot of us often in this lives are caretakers, whether it's spouses, to children, to parents. We're in more responsibility in things in our home, mortgages, and we forget that. We don't have the time to do that. So that's beautiful. You were going to say something?
Just saying that sort of leaning in more.
Yes, you notice that, right?
Yeah.
This is one of the things when I talk to people about interviewing, when you tell people stories like this, you get them to lean in, and there's a whole line of research around emotional contagiousness, where your brains pick this up in somebody else. It actually shows this. You don't even realize this, but we have emotional contagiousness in brains. If you have 3 people in a room, the person with the strongest personality, the brain waves pick this up. There's like MRI imaging on this. So you're leaning in and getting excited when you're talking about this, if you're in an interview, let alone if you're already feeling this way, even not even an interview, if you're just networking with somebody at a networking event, instead of feeling all awkward and like, oh my God, what do I have to say? Just kind of sharing the story of who you are with somebody real briefly, you lean in. It's intoxicating, I think. Anybody come up with some surprises, things that came up that like, didn't realize that this brought me flow? Or hearing somebody identify strength about you. Yeah.
We can imagine the situation because it was a story, so you want to plunge into the place where
This is again gets to the fact of why stories in interviews are really compelling, because your brains actually like stories.
Mm-hmm.
Your brains crave stories as part of the way that your brains are wired, and you do want to jump in. What else? Anybody else hear something about them described around a strength that was kind of like, oh, I've forgotten about this about myself? Or this, how could this play out in what I'm thinking about for a job? What I would encourage,
I'll say, as a director, filmmaker, media person, Nedra, I don't think she realized that she's not just a director, but she's really a motivator. We're in the same page.
What a great word choice. What a fantastic word choice. That's amazing. This is why I would encourage you when you come out of this class, is that take some time to do this. And when I encourage people to write their instances of flow, I tell them to, they don't have to be long. Sometimes I've had people who are really creative actually draw them. I've had some people collage. I've had some people that are really clear cut. They're like, I'm just putting bullets here. I've had other people write paragraphs. So whatever lights you up on that. A similar activity I have clients do that kind of leads into the next one is, have you guys heard of the STAR method before for interview preparation? Mm-hmm. It's a common method people talk about, which is when you're thinking about interview situation, what was the situation that you handled in the workplace? This helps you get at that thing of grit I talked about in the beginning. What was the situation? That's the S. What was the task? What were the actions? And what was the result? You Google online STAR method. It's a really common one they use for interview prep. I have people do it in this part of the process because I think it helps them recognize their strengths, it helps them through career exploration, it's stronger for resumes, cover letters. But the trick of what I do is I actually call it the STARS method. And if you go to my website after this, actually under the resources section, I write a monthly blog for a positive psychology site on positive psychology and careers. And I wrote a blog about this because I was working with a client who was actually in his early 30s, and he was transitioning from being acting. He had done that for a while, was doing business development, which he couldn't stand, and he wanted to go into international relations, and he's actually started at George Mason this fall in international relations, so proud of him. But he didn't see who he was. So we did this STARS activity where he thought about things in his work, and the S of it is the strengths. So take some time to do this. It's going to help you with, again, resumes, cover letters, interviews, but it also helps you identify within each of these situations what intrinsic talent is motivator, and then what extrinsic competencies did you use, which actually leads us to the next one when I talk to people about extrinsic competencies. So these are some activities I'm giving you for takeaways within this. Anybody ever good at something in their job that everybody loves to have them do and they cannot stand to do? Right? You default into that role because you're really good at it, but you really are like, oh my God, if I get asked to plan one more event, right? Or if I'm the person that has to be the speaker at the meeting who I cannot stand. So this is in your handout, this activity, and I'm gonna have you just spend a couple minutes on your own doing this. Is I want you to think about as many professional competencies as you use in your career. And think about putting them in these buckets. And let me clarify, that one is there is dislike or dislike and are weak at. So there could be things in that bucket you actually are really great at, but you can't stand doing. The middle one is typically a bigger one, the ones that you like and are good at. And then this also tends to be, this is more of that place of flow that you love or love and are great. So sometimes something's going to end up in that love bucket. You might not be great at it yet, but you naturally know you love to do it. And this is where when I talk to people about how to build out into their career, I talk about 3 legs of the career table, which is education, employment, and enrichment. And I talk about thinking about those 3 legs of the table. If you find something under love, the example I'll give with this is that I always knew I loved to train. I hadn't really done a lot of it when I was in my 30s. So I said those 3 legs of the table are employment, education, and enrichment. So I paid for my own training when I was at my job to get trained as a trainer through Association of Training and Development. So I paid that. That was under the education leg. In my job, I was working at a nonprofit. I wrote a grant that was aligned with the mission of the organization and did what I like to call leaning out in a job. And I got this grant, so I got to develop a leadership institute within the organization. So in my job, I got to practice these skills. Plus, the biggest kicker, I got to bring in tons of great trainers that I got to watch and learn from because I was so new at this. I didn't know how to be good at it, so I got to learn from people. So that's leaning out, that's the employment side of that 3-leg stool. The last one was enrichment. Started to do a lot of pro bono work in the training space. No one was going to pay me. I was just doing pro bono work. I was building my skill set. Started to go to networking events, started to talk to people at your network, your associations, your conferences, and enrichment. So sometimes things that end up in that love bucket, don't be worried if you're like, I'm not good at it yet. Then you can start to think about how through a job, how through, and it doesn't need to be that, how through, an enrichment or education, you can start to move into that space. So I want everybody to take some time, you have this in your handout, take some time. One other caveat I just want to say is be as specific as possible. Don't write on there, I like to write. Be like, do you like to write creative reports or creative, writing? Do you like to write technical reports, policy memos, emails? Be as specific as possible within these things. Like there's certain kind of speaking I like to do and there's certain kind of speaking I don't like to do. The more specific you are, the more helpful this is going to be in shaping this out. You're not going to have time to do the whole thing here, but hopefully this will get you started. I want to give you guys about 3 minutes to work on this and then talk about it before we get into values and purpose for the last half an hour. Okay, questions on this? Great.
I can go to it.
So it seems like in the examples that you gave.
Yes, the handouts were out there.
If you could you could tune into the students and you could help them see more of who they were and find out what was their passion, their mission. And so it was your use that part.
That's your cue. One of my favorite all-time movies. So someone started to have a question.
Well, being over a certain age, I've noticed my mind is not as sharp. When I'm simply don't have the capacity, cognitively and mentally, that I used to have. So I feel like I'm in terrain that's not, like I can't look back on what I liked before or what I did before, because it's quite possible that I can't do it anymore.
It's a really honest assessment. And there might be some things that you put on that list that you love, that you realistically say, maybe you can't do it at all. Maybe you can do it in a different capacity. And maybe it's, you know, a smaller portion of the job. And that's the honest part of, you know, I think there's a lot of advantages as we get older in the wisdom of what we do, and then there's some things that are shortcomings, that are just changes in how the energy we have or what we can do. So that's why I think doing this list forces us to be really honest with ourselves, whether it's something like that, or whether it's something we realize that we've been ignoring. So it's a really good comment. I wish I had an easy answer for it, but I don't, because I'm not going to ever pretend I have an easy answer. I think it's just part of it. You know, I'm working with a private client right now who's been a photographer for a long time, and he's trying to get into a full-time job. And he really does not have the capacity to pick up the technology that's going to be required for some of the jobs he was looking at, and we had to have very, very honest conversations. I have another client in her early 50s who actually just started a job Tuesday, who had worked for a long time, much more higher level, but has dealt with some mental health issues that as she's gotten older has really taken hold of her, and had to shift into more administrative positions. And we had a very honest conversation about, I say to people all the time, it's not the job you want, it's not the career you want, it's the life you want, and a certain thing in our lives with whatever factors are non-negotiable for who we are, what's in the factors in our life. There's things that we have to let go. There's another side of research, just to let you know, it's a little bit off subject, but just to say there's something called re-goaling. Laura King has done a lot of research on this, particularly with people with, she's done a lot of the research, but I think it's also applicable, and I've used it a lot with career, with people who have children that have some health issues, and she works with people around re-goaling, where you have to really re-look at your life and change your goals. And in some ways she has to do, there's a lot around journal writing, and doing some journal writing of releasing goals of things we wanted that just aren't possible in our lives anymore. And the process of writing it, they've found, has helped people make peace and then be able to come at what they're doing now with a sense of excitement and embracing what's possible, because they've released what's no longer going to happen. Yeah. What else came up for people? Anything surprising that someone put in the love or the hate or the, you know, somewhere in the middle? One way to help people kind of do this, if you recall in your handout, there is some guides around some assessments you can do for competencies if you have a tough time thinking of competencies. I often tell people, again, to go back to performance evaluations. Another trick I suggest to people when they're trying to navigate and figure out what to do next professionally, or they're looking to make a transition, I tell people to open up a Word document on their computer and just save it as, like, you know, whatever you want to save it as. Look at tons of different job descriptions. Don't look at the qualifications, just look at the bullets that they list for responsibilities. Copy and paste bullets that get you really excited. If you happen to find a job where like 90% of it is like gets you really excited, print out that job. But for the most part, just you might copy and paste 3 or 4 bullets into this Word document. Don't look at the Word document. I suggest people do this for several days, maybe even like a week, of just kind of looking at different jobs and then just copying them into this Word document. And look at all different types of jobs. Again, don't look at the type of organization it is or the qualifications. then what you do is you go back to the Word document, you're going to notice certain responsibilities, certain competencies that you're like, God, I pulled tons of competencies that had to do with policy writing or with doing business development or whatever it is. You're going to notice because you've done it. That's why I tell people to do it for several days, because you're going to forget what you copied and pasted. But you're going to notice that you keep, this is how I ended up realizing that I was drawn to training, is I kept noticing it, and I hadn't done it as strategically as this, because this was early in my career before I was working as a career coach. But I had noticed that so many job descriptions were looking for someone as a trainer. And I was like, wow, I think I really would want to explore this. So we want to notice those things. So it's just an activity, again, to help you think of things, because it's hard sometimes to think of all these different competencies. And then you might take that list and then think about from that list, what have you already done and what might go into some of these buckets. Any more questions around the strength side before we get now into the values? Okay, so next is this is what you had spoken about, the values. I look at this as what size of ship you're on, who's running your ship, who's on the ship with you. This is your employer values. What are you looking for in your place of employment, which could be your own business. You might say, I don't want to have anybody telling me anything. It could be that that's your employment value. And some people might want to have their own business and work from home, and some people might be like, I really like a collegial work environment and go to a shared workspace. So it's thinking about what you want for employment values, and then how do you want your work to fit with your life. I know some people who want to work 80 hours a week, who don't want to have no life. I know some people who don't mind having a long commute. I know some people who have to have a short commute or want to have part-time hours. So thinking about this, again, this is not work-life balance, which is just never, it just, that whole phrase should just be banned. It's about how you want your work to fit with your life. Because it's a constant balancing act. But the more you know what matters to you, a friend of mine made this phrase the other day, and I love this, because she was always, for many years, she's about 10 years older than me, doing just really, really extraordinary work, always getting new trainings and this and that. And I said to her, Shoshana, she's an amazing trainer. And that's how I first met her, so I emulated her as a trainer, and then asked her to kind of meet with me, and now she's a friend of mine. I said, what's next for you? She said this line of love. She said, at this point in my life, I'm more concerned with the depth of my career than the height of my career. And I love that phrase. It really helps her to know what to say yes to, so then she knows what to say no to. That's work-life values. So we're going to do a fun little activity for about 5 minutes, where what you're going to get is everybody's going to get a stack of cards with lots of work-life values and employment values in them. You're going to have about 5 minutes to trade with people, to try to create the best selection of cards in your hand that you really want. So these are randomly being given to you. So you don't know what's in them. So once you get them, get up and start trading with people and see what you can trade with. See what you matters to you. You can, well, you might want to, you could give them away. You might do a 2-for-1, but you want to try to get values that you really care about, that matters most to you. I think I got enough cards. Hold on a second. I think I divided them up the right way. So get up, move around, see what matters to you, see what's missing from your stack that you might want to get. Whoa! Well, that was pretty good. They all fell together. That was pretty impressive.
Well, sometimes you have more of the same.
You might have more of the same, so feel free to go about and trade. There you go. Ken, here you go. I'm going to give you one too. Go trade, get up around and trade with people, see what you got. You got 5 minutes to come up with the best deck in your hand.
Are these supposed to be in here?
Whoops, someone must have written those on. That was really fun. Oh, I know what that is.
Anyone ambitious for annual reviews, opportunities for advancement?
I'll take the advancement one.
Reporting around,
Anybody want to work?
Get up, move around, people. Stand up, move, get the blood circulating.
I like that one.
Staff got after hours. You might want to interact with their staff after hours.
I got one.
Staff meeting out after hours.
Positions provide mobility within different departments.
But I have a pretty good organization, so you can hear about what's up the hard staff. Position provides mobility.
Yeah, I can. I like fast paced.
I've got several twice.
Somebody took all my good. What do you need?
Let me ask you a question. Stop for a second. If I was to give you a $20,000 raise, what 7 cards, the first person to give me 7 cards they're ready to give up gets a $20,000 raise.
7 cards you're gonna give up?
You know, so your whatever you're willing to give up for a $20,000 raise. Ken gets a $20,000 raise. He gave up 7 cards. He gave them all up, so you have no benefits, but you're gonna get $20,000 vacation time. Okay. Oh, he's done.
It's balls, good. You're off the way from it.
Many internal meetings.
I pushed out the window. You don't care about
Organization is a prestigious employer.
Grab a seat, everybody grab a seat.
Yeah.
Grab a seat, everybody. Training is done. Training is done.
I probably have it twice.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. Baseball cards.
Now what I want you to do is count the number of cards you have in your hand. Count the number of total cards in your hand. Total cards in your hand. Count the number of cards in your hand. And then whatever you have, get rid of 50% of them, take away. You're only going to keep half of what's in your hand as your benefits. I want you to choose the half of them that you care the most about. And then hand them to me, the ones that you don't want.
You don't.
You don't want. Hand the ones to me you don't want. Ken already gave them all up. He has no benefits. He's working 24/7. You went up fast with $20,000.
Would it be an odd number?
I'll let you have the higher number. I always get asked that question. Somebody always asks.
Then we order them in priority.
Just wait to home just a second. Thanks.
Overachiever.
Anyone else getting rid of some cards? Did you get rid of half of them?
Mhm.
Get rid of half. Everybody get rid of half. Get rid of half. Anybody else still need to get rid of half? Make the decision. Get rid of half. Come on. Everybody's waiting for you. The benefits package is set, signed, it's closing out.
Come on, keep going.
I'm gonna take. I'm just taking. Does that ever happen in the workplace? Does that ever happen in the workplace? Oh, where someone just gives you random benefits?
Uh-huh.
You'll be a good example of what
Well,
I get to do.
maternity leave, I know.
How devastated you are, and this is just to give you, as if this is really your activities. Now,
Okay, and 23 is kind of expected.
half them again.
What?
Half it again. Whatever is most important to you, half it again. Half. Look at what is the most important things for you. These you can hold on to. You can hold on to these. Raise your hand if you need another minute to finish up the dividing round. Let's talk about this. What do you have in your hand now? Are you happy with what you have in your hand? You can hold on to them. Are you happy with what you have as the ones that you just left when I made you to have it in the second time? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Who's not happy? Everybody loves what they have? How many people in the room know all the benefits that were available to them? You don't. Nobody knows all the benefits that were available, right? When you go into a job negotiation or you go into this, it's so critical that you really take the time. And these are some assessments, workplace values assessments. You know, you're not going to, I mean, part of an interview process is you start to explore this. Part of kind of networking beforehand, you start to find out what's available at an organization. It is really critical for you simultaneously to learn what you value around the work-life fit and employment values, and also what is available to you. You might find out, wow, my colleague ended up getting to negotiate for more salary. I didn't even know that was on the table. I didn't even know I could telework for a day a week, and I found out someone in another department's been doing that for the past 6 months. So one of the reasons that I do this activity is for you to really be aware. It's amazing. People here were pretty calm. I've had people get really aggressive. Your face was hysterical when I took the wrong cards. I mean, this was just a game. And you were like, the nerve of her to take these cards. Like, it's so funny to me how quickly someone will get upset at something, will give up. He gave up all of his cards for $20,000. Sometimes people are duking it out over, like, I mean, it's a hypothetical. It's not like I'm giving people the money. But this is what people get just doing this activity. And then when I make you half it and then half it again, and people have to really make decisions and think about what is the most important thing to you. An activity I often have my clients do, and they have to figure out what the right litmus test is for them. For some people, it's salary points. For some people, it's a cause for an organization. But what are the negotiables and non-negotiables you're willing to give up for a certain point? Sometimes someone does it by salary points, and they might say, you know, if I was making $90,000 a year, it would be okay if I had a longer commute. But if I'm making $75,000, I need to be able to work at home 1 day a week. It's really, so I always encourage people to come up with about 3 different litmus points and to think about those values around what kind of your work-life fit and it's the employer values that you're looking for. And see what's within that list, what's a non-negotiable for those work-life values, employment values. You know, what's the culture? My organization, I knew before starting GW that my boss in my school is not an uptight school, which is very kind of not common for a school of public policy and public administration. I can't think of the last time I've had to wear a suit jacket there. You know, this is the feeling my boss it is an incredibly student-centric school. I knew that was a value to me that was non-negotiable. So it's looking at these things and really taking the time. Anybody surprised what they ended up realizing was super important to them and that they end up keeping and trading for? What came up? You're nodding your head. Did something come up?
2 to 3 weeks of vacation at least. I'm self-employed, so now one of my goals, and especially as I mature in my work and is making more and more time for that.
Yeah, and it's knowing that stuff. And the example I think about with this, it's funny, when I worked at a nonprofit when I was up in Boston, the organization was going through a massive rework and really bare bones. And so when I went in there, I knew that the organization was going to give me a chance to get to know lots of nonprofits, and the work was going to be incredibly rewarding, but they weren't able to reward me financially. So I negotiated for a 6-month salary review instead of a year salary review. After 6 months, she barely could do anything. But what she did do is she gave me an extra week of paid vacation. Plus, she knew how much I loved to travel. She got a board member to donate frequent flyer miles to me. So I was able to go to Galapagos. Right? Because I used the flight money to get to Ecuador, and then it was only at the flight I needed to pay to Galapagos. And it showed me that my boss valued me. Now, did I know that that was on a card and that was on the table? No. And that's why the more creatively you think about what matters. And it helped me also feel like even though my boss couldn't reward me financially, I knew that she knew what mattered to me. Anything else come up to people that was surprising on their cards? Or not surprising, that they're like, this is really important to me. How do I find this in a job? How do I find this out about a job? That's often a question that comes up.
I thought it was interesting, my employer is active in the community. Haven't thought about that so much, but it was something that came forefront.
And that might be something you think about, like, does that matter to me, the role that my employer plays in the community, that they make an impact, and what does that mean to me? Does that mean they're doing corporate days of service, or does that mean that they're really helping build the community that they work in? That's great. And again, the question a lot of times I get from people is like, how do, specific things, so I'm opening some questions now, like how do I find this out about what I'm looking for? Or what does this mean? How do I create a job that builds that? Are there any questions about this? So the next one we're going to talk about is causes and industries. What gives you professional meaning? This is that, for the strengths, values, and purpose. This is pretty significant. When people see their life as strong purpose, they are more focused, resilient, and inventive in goals. There's a lot of research been coming out recently around the role of people having purpose. And as I talked about with that study earlier, the purpose doesn't need to be a save the world purpose. It can be how you find purpose in your work. I have a friend of mine, she is the director of digital marketing for Party City. She has always loved, her purpose is always working with like startup companies, really innovative companies on the online things. That gives her purpose and meaning. So for some people, it's always, environmental causes. Some people, it's, I really want to do legal work and provide that into the community. So an activity, we're going to do one more activity here. I'm just going to give you a few minutes to do this because I think it's important for people to take this beyond the theoretical. Is I think about for people to think about everything that gives you meaning. And I talk to people about these 4 buckets, and it's in your handout. Ooh, I realize it's in shelf really good here. Like things you want to learn about, things you want to donate money to, things you want to volunteer your time in, things you want to work. And these were some questions that that's the wrong word, sorry. What are you and what's the curious by? Sorry. I find that there's a lot of clues out there. What do you naturally read? What do you naturally delete? I tell people also to think about what events do you go to that you sit in the back of the room and you realize you're on your phone the whole time? And which ones you really pay attention to? I went this summer to the World Congress on Positive Psychology. There was barely a session where I was on my phone. I was so intrigued. The ones where I found that I was on my phone were the ones that were super, super research heavy because my brain doesn't work that way. But the ones that were really practical orientation of the research, I was like, I want to soak this in. I would feel like flow in these sessions, absorbing it. I got to train there when I was training on hope. I'm using hope in coaching, and that was a moment of flow for me. So I'm really amazed at that. This is what gets me excited. When you look at Twitter feeds, which one of things do you read, which do you not read? The clues are often there of what we're drawn to. I told you about this woman who was drawn to social work, and she had just not paid attention to it. A question I'll just give another example of a client, and then I'm going to give you a few minutes to work on this. I worked on another client, and I asked him a question related to this, and I said, if I waved a wand and gave you anonymity for the next part of your career, Anonymity, nobody would know what you did. So it didn't matter if it had meaning, it didn't have meaning. He said, what would you do? He said, I would be a professor of string theory. He said, what? The only reason I know about string theory is because of Big Bang Theory. And so I was like, okay, let's play with this. And we had some time between sessions, and he did a little research, and he started to read about it. He started to read some articles that associated string theory with big data, that similar kind of theoretical thinking. He was in the data kind of world, but not in the big data kind of world. And he started to get really excited because he was in his late 40s, 2 kids, mortgage, his wife was a professor, they weren't about to go up and move anywhere else. And so what we did, and we're going to talk about this at the last section, is we built a career strategy that would enable him to start to shift into that direction. He started to look at what trainings he would need to get. He had lots of conversations with people because big data is really hot right now, and we wanted to make sure that what he was going to get training in was actually what was being accepted in the field. We looked at there was actually a conference that was happening right around that time at GW, and he started to talk to people there. Then he was talking to his boss. What ways could he start to do that in his job? This goes back to that concept I talked about, the education, employment, and enrichment. And he got that from really thinking about what things, like he said, I still read about string theory. It was amazing, but it was there, and we just had to put the pieces together. So I want you to just take a couple minutes and think about what categories we're going here. What would give you professional meaning? And again, it doesn't have to be a cause. Mine has always been inspiring people to see their potential. I used to work in nonprofits. Now it's in careers. It wasn't necessarily I needed to work on poverty issues or youth development. That was the piece that lit me up, that gave me meaning. So again, just try to think about this. You may be able to write some things down. It might come harder for you, and it could be something you do from here.